Okay, so yeah, welcome everybody, and sorry I can't be with you in the hall, but I'm not feeling at my best, so you're gonna have to put up with having me on Zoom. As you're probably aware, we've been following this theme of looking at this composite image of the 5 Buddha mandala, sort of exploded diagram of the qualities of enlightenment. And we've been relating the various Buddhas in this mandala to particular, they're called paramitas, the practices of the Bodhisattva path, the practices of the great way of the Mahayana. Paramita meaning can be variously translated as perfection, but can also be translated as ways beyond, ways to the other shore, ways to transcend ourselves. So these practices that allow us to transcend the small self that we think we are and become something larger and more expansive. And we heard last week about the red Buddha, Amitabha, who sits in the west of the mandala, who embodies mostly the warm emotional aspects of enlightenment, metta and compassion. And obviously all of the Buddhas of the mandala seen in their depths include all the aspects of enlightenment. But with Amitabha, these warm heart aspects are very much to the fore, very connected with his red color, his warm red color, in contrast to the cool color, the cool blue of Akshobhya, who sits opposite him in the east, and who emphasizes more the cool cognitive head aspects of enlightenment. And we've heard that the name Amitabha means infinite light. So his infinite light is, as it were, pervading the universe. We've heard that he's, Mogavangsa, I've somehow got a Mogavangsa. Hello, it's supposed to be me. We've heard that his time of day is the sunset, the dusk of sunset. And we've heard that his animal, slightly bizarrely, is the peacock. And it's the peacock because apparently in India, the connection with the peacock, apparently in India, peacocks are regarded as eating snakes. And the idea is that the wonderful colors that they create, the beauty they create, comes from they convert the snake's poison into beauty. So Amitabha converts poison into beauty. And yeah, as I said, we've been connecting these Buddhas with the 6 paramitas. And each Buddha has a mudra, a gesture, that in a way connects them very strongly with the paramitas, with one of the practices of the great way of the Bodhisattva path. And Amitabha sits with his hands in the gesture of meditation. So clearly he is connected to the paramita, the Dhyana paramita, the paramita of meditation, the 5th of the 6 paramitas. But from what I've said so far, this connection between Amitabha and meditation is perhaps not quite so obvious. There's a very obvious connection between Akshobhya, whose name means immovable, with his earth-touching mudras, gesture of stability, and his elephant animal, with the practice of shanti, patient forbearance, or being immovable in the face of events and what people do, just being immovable in our positive mental states, not blown around by events and other people. And there's a very obvious connection between Ratnasambhava with his gesture of giving, his abundance and his gesture of giving. Very, very clear connection to the practice of generosity. But with Amitabha, perhaps the connection with meditation is not so obvious. So to explore what that connection is, I'm going to refer quite a lot to the great manual of the 6 paramitas. the great manual of the Bodhisattva path, a text called the Bodhicharya of Shantideva, which you'll have heard of before. And in Shantideva's chapter on meditation, on the parameter of meditation, this is sort of divided into two parts. It's sort of divided into two parts. And traditionally, meditation practices are often divided into two types. So we have samatha meditation and vipassana meditation. Those are the Pali words, or I think it's shamatha and vipassana in Sanskrit. And the actual practices will overlap to some extent. But generally, samatha meditation is about creating a calm but alert, clear, unified mind that is capable of seeing things as they are. So some of the analogies that are sometimes used for this, I mean, a more traditional analogy is our normal mind is like muddy water, and samatha meditation allows the mud to settle out so there's clear water that we can see clearly through. Or a more modern analogy that I think Sangha used is of our normal mind being like a torch, like an electric torch with a very, very diffuse beam by which we can't see hardly anything. And meditation, samatha meditation, being like a focusing, turning the focus so that the beam becomes unified. We've got a clear, bright beam that we can see where we're going by. So that's samatha meditation, about creating a fit mind, creating a sort of mind that's fit to see reality. And then vipassana meditation is about using this clarified, purified mind to see more clearly into the nature of things. It's often described as insight meditation, but that may be a bit misleading. That may be a bit misleading if, as we probably do, we think of insight as a sort of intellectual knowing, as some sort of philosophical knowing of some sort of philosophical truth. That would be quite a misleading idea, as we shall see. So Shantideva, in his chapter on the parameter of Dhyana, the parameter of meditation, talks about both these aspects of meditation. And both can be connected to Amitabha, but that connection is most obvious when we look at what Shantideva has to say about Vipassana meditation, about insight meditation, if you like. So, as I've said, samatha meditation is about creating a calm, clear, alert mind. So one aim of samatha meditation is to open the doorway to a set of higher mental states called the dhyanas, the jhanas in Sanskrit, in Pali, the dhyanas. And so the dhyana, the word is similar. It's the word for meditation, but these are dhyanas. They're meditative states, and these are incredibly pleasant higher states in which our whole being is, as it were, brought together into one coherent whole, with none of the usual inner conflicts and distractions that we usually experience. And this unification, well, it includes our depths. So the depths where there's blocked energy of various sorts. So our blocked energy is released by our contact with the depths. And this can result in physical thrills, shivers up the spine, called priti. So we're connected vertically with the different aspects of ourselves, horizontally with our depths, and also with our heights. We're also connected to our heights. We're unified with our heights. The higher, wiser, maybe even divine aspects of ourselves that we're usually out of touch with. So in these states, we may experience inspirations and ideas that come from beyond. We may suddenly see, well, there's no problem there. There may be a problem that we've been experiencing and thinking about, trying to nut our way through, and they're just, that's obvious. It's absolutely obvious. We just know what to do. So we may get these inspirations from a wiser aspect of ourselves. And yes, so in these states of dhyana, we experience, as I said, both an alert, precise clarity of vision, along with a deep sense of peace. And at the higher levels of the dhyanas, the boundary between ourselves and the world around us and others becomes, as it were, blurred and softened, so that our sense of being this isolated individual becomes attenuated. Our sense of being separate and lonely is weakened. And these states are profoundly enjoyable. As I've said, they can be thrilling. They can send shivers up the spine, especially perhaps when we first experience them. Although those shivers are said to be to do with the lower levels of the dhyanas, at the higher levels, there's just this deep sense of happiness, a sense of rightness, a sense of beauty, without any of those sort of exciting physical thrills. So these states, where if I describe them like this, they might sound so wonderful as to be unobtainable. But actually, most regular meditators will experience at least glimpses and touches of the dhyanas, especially if they go on retreat. And that doesn't have to be a sort of nut it out meditation retreat. Actually, often a more balanced retreat with a bit of conceptual input, and et cetera, can be more fruitful, especially earlier on in our practice. But going on retreat, taking ourselves away from our normal environments, is usually the way that we open the door to the dhyanas. Then maybe we can connect with them in our daily practice. Although having said that, I've had experience of people getting into the dhyanas on their second introductory class, for example, and they've come to me and said, "Oh," I said, "Oh, got a touch of the dhyanas there," or people feeling terrified because they feel they're on the edge of something. Whoa, they've never experienced before, and they want to pull back from it. And that is like being on the edge of the dhyanas, but not allowing ourselves to let go into them. So as I've said, they might sound unobtainable, but I think, stick at it, you will experience glimpses of the dhyanas. Most regular meditators do. And many of us will experience quite commonly, I think, in meditation, once we've got an established practice, what's called access concentration, which is like the doorway to the dhyanas, which in a way you feel the effects of the dhyanas a bit like the dhyanas. You know they're there. You get some of the sense of poise and uplift and can't describe it. Niceness of the dhyanas. And that is okay. It's okay that we experience that, or maybe just the lower levels of the dhyanas, because we don't need to be in the higher levels to get the benefit, because the benefit is seeing things more as they are. And in fact, that is said to be easier in the lower levels of the dhyanas than higher up. In fact, sometimes traditionally the higher dhyanas are seen as a bit of an irrelevance, a bit of a sort of pointless self-indulgence. So yeah, as meditators, we can experience those dhyanas. And in his chapter on meditation, Shantideva talks about how to get beyond the distractions that normally stop us getting into samatha, getting into the dhyanas, or more generally getting into the sort of peace of samatha meditation. And he talks about how to leave behind the worldly concerns and attachments that would stop us going on a long retreat, because traditionally that would be seen as the way that you do get into the dhyanas. It would be seen as the way you stabilize samatha, dwell in the dhyanas for a while so that you can really revisit them. And we may not be able to go on a long retreat, but as I've said, going on a shorter retreat, taking ourselves away from our normal environment is really, really important in terms of getting into the dhyanas. there's a word, no, I won't go into that. No, okay. Anyway, so Shantideva evokes the pleasure of experiencing the dhyanas in a sort of, I mean, he's not talking about them directly, but he sort of evokes the pleasure where in his chapter where he says, we should join the fortunate ones who pace slowly over pleasant flat rock surfaces, spacious as palaces, under the cool rays of the moon, caressed by gentle forest breezes, meditating for the well-being of others, passing the time as they please, sleeping in an empty house at the foot of a tree or in a cave, free from the exhaustion of looking after a household, free of care, not tied down by anything. They taste a joy and contentment that is hard to find, even for a king. So yes, I think a lot of that imagery sort of conveys something about what it feels like to be in those states, pacing slowly over pleasant flat rock surfaces, spacious as palaces, under the cool rays of the moon, caressed by gentle breezes. And this idea of being completely free from care, not tied down by anything. And of course, that's what we need to go on retreat for, to not be tied down by anything, to be freed from care, at least for a while. And then perhaps we can taste this joy and contentment that is hard to find even for a king, as Shantideva says. So that's a bit about samatha meditation and what Shantideva has to say about it. As I've said before, the connection to meditation between meditation and dhyana is most obvious when we get to Vipassana meditation. For me, there's also a strong connection between Amitabha and samatha meditation. And for me, this is evoked strongly by his time of day, sunset, dusk. I'm lucky enough to live in a house where we see the sunsets for quite a lot of the year. We've got distant views and we see the sunset. And to sit mindfully, observing the beautiful detail of a sunset, absorbing the experience, has got a lot of absorbing the atmosphere, has got a lot of the qualities of dhyana. It's as though there's a deep peace descends on the world at sunset. The world becomes quiet, the animals become quiet, the birds become quiet, the traffic dies down, the wind often drops, and there's this deep peace descending. And of course, there's this great beauty. There's this, and to watch a sunset and really experience it, there's this combination of clear, alert attention to the beautiful details and receptivity to the sort of atmosphere of peace that I think is very characteristic of samatha meditation, of samatha state. So for me, it could send thrills up my spine as meditation can. I mean, so I think there are ways of being focused on a beautiful thing like a sunset. For me, particularly a sunset, that are very, very evocative of the peace of meditation, of samatha meditation, of peace, but also the precise quality of attention of samatha meditation. More so than dawn, I think, because dawn, the day's ahead of us, all the busyness of the day is ahead of us, whereas there's a sense of putting everything down at sunset, this sense that we can forget about things, we can forget about responsibilities. So I think, I think sunset is very, very evocative of meditation. So there's a connection between Amitabha and meditation. I also think there's a connection with this animal, the snake. So the snake is said to eat poisonous snakes, and convert the poison into beauty. And in a way, that's what we're doing in samatha meditation. We become aware of our poisonous mental states, our poisonous thoughts. And by being aware of them, but not sort of involving ourselves with them, treating them as mental weather, rising above them, being in the gap as regards to them, we sort of convert them into beauty. They become converted into beauty. So I think there's a really strong connection between Amitabha's animal, the peacock, converting poison into beauty, and samatha meditation, and what awareness can do for us. So there's a connection at that level on samatha meditation, but as I've said, the connection becomes clearer, even clearer, when we look at what Shantideva has to say about Vipassana meditation, insight meditation, if you like. Because for Shantideva, the point of Vipassana meditation is not to see into some philosophical theory, for example. It is to arouse the warm, connecting emotions that are embodied in Amitabha. So here is part of what he says about that, part of what he says about samatha, about Vipassana meditation. When we have calmed our distracted minds by detachment from worldly desires and the experience of solitude, in other words, shamatha, so when we have calmed our distracted minds, we should then meditate to develop the bodhicitta. First, we should meditate intently on the equality of self and others, thinking, we are all the same. We all feel the same suffering and happiness. So I should look after others as I look after myself. Just as I love and cherish my body, which is divided into many limbs, so I should love and cherish this whole world, which is divided into many beings. So he's using his version of samatha is very much to see this connectedness, to see this non-difference between ourselves and others. And he includes, of course, this aspect of non-self. So he goes on to say, this stream of mental moments I call my mind. These ever-changing elements I call my body are not some separate thing that exists in its own right. So who is this separate person that someone's suffering belongs to? Suffering is just suffering. It has no owner. I should relieve it just because it is suffering. Those who have developed their mind in this way, who feel this joy in releasing others, they are the ones who are truly fulfilled. What is the point in some cold liberation just for oneself alone? So what is the point in some sort of supposed insight into some sort of philosophical view, some cold liberation just for oneself alone? For Shantideva, insight is all about connecting with others. Shantideva, the whole point of non-self, seeing into non-self, is to connect us to others and to lead us to act for the benefit of others, and not just ourselves, to see and to act with the metta and the compassion of our embodied in Amitabha. And for him, this is not sort of some sort of sacrifice. It's not any sort of self-martyrdom. It's not even sort of being good. It's certainly not pleasing God or anything like that. Because what it is a reflection of the nature of reality. It is, according to Shantideva, for Shantideva, in fact, the secret of true happiness, the secret of true fulfillment, to see this connectedness. So he says, whoever longs to quickly exchange themselves and others should practice this supreme mystery, exchanging self and other. All the suffering in the world comes from obsession with ourselves. All the joy in the world comes from wanting others to be happy. Why say more? The fool looks out for his own benefit. The sage acts for the benefit of all. Just look at the difference between them. So to cure my own suffering, as well as the suffering of others, I devote myself to others and will see them as myself. So Sangha, so he's advising us to use samatha meditation, not just to gain some sort of cold metaphysical insight, but as he puts it, to exchange self and others, to put ourselves in others' shoes, to see the world through others' eyes. So he says, whoever longs to quickly save themselves and others should practice this supreme mystery, exchanging self and other. So a lot of his chapter, a lot of the sort of latter part of his chapter on meditation is in fact about how we do this. He gives us instructions, and his instructions take a particular form. He talks about how to put ourselves into the shoes of someone who is higher status than ourselves, someone who is equal status to ourselves, and people of lower status than ourselves who we perhaps rather look down upon. Obviously, there was a lot of concern for status in Shantideva's world, even within a monastery. But if we think we're beyond that, I think quite often we Westerners can think we're beyond concerns for status. But if we think we are beyond that, we are almost certainly, I think, deluding ourselves. If we think we don't, at some level, resent and feel envious of those above us in power and status, those with more power and status than ourselves, if we think we don't feel competitiveness towards our equals, and if we think there's nobody we look down on, I think we should probably think again. But be that as it may, this practice of exchanging self for other, putting ourselves behind the eyes of others and looking out of the world through their eyes, seeing from their point of view, is for Shantideva real insight, real going beyond the self, real seeing of non-self. It's because we see the world from our own single point of view, through the lenses of our own particular wants and likes and dislikes and views and conditionings. It's because we see the world in that very limited and subjective and distorted way. It's because of that we are deluded rather than enlightened. So putting ourselves in others' shoes and looking out through their eyes, it may not allow us to see like a Buddha, but it expands our perspective. It shows us that there's more ways of seeing things. It shows us that we are not the center of the universe, and it overcomes our sense of separation. So I came across a saying, I don't know where it comes from, but the saying is there is no wisdom in a single point of view. And I think there's a truth in that. So seeing the world from the point, maybe there's a wisdom in a Buddha's point of view, but from our perspective, there's no wisdom in a single point of view. So seeing the world from the point of view of others as well as ourselves is at least a step towards wisdom. It's a step towards a higher perspective. It sort of opens up a higher perspective. I can imagine that if we saw the world through lots of different eyes, we would see it much more accurately. We would also, quite frighteningly, see ourselves much more accurately if we saw ourselves through others' eyes. And this putting ourselves in others' shoes, behind others' eyes, of course, leads to concern for others. It leads to metta for others. It leads to compassion for others. It leads to the warm emotional aspect of enlightenment that Amitabha most obviously embodies. And it leads to Amitabha's discriminating wisdom. I forgot to say anything about his discriminating wisdom. Amitabha's wisdom is called discriminating because it is the wisdom which sees the particular qualities of each individual thing and loves them for it, each individual thing and each individual person. Whereas Ratnasambhava's wisdom of sameness sees the connectedness of everything, Amitabha's discriminating wisdom sees the uniqueness of things, what makes life really interesting and loves each being for their unique qualities. So this putting ourselves in others' shoes, if you like, can lead to this wisdom that loves others for being the unique beings that they are, and not because they fit in with our likes or our views or our expectations. And of course, all this is very relevant to our meditation. What Shantideva says about exchanging self and others is very relevant to our meditation. So in our Metta Bhavana practice, we can practice exchanging self for others, making the imaginative effort to see the world through other people's eyes, even to see ourselves through other people's eyes, which can be a salutary experience. We can call to mind the unique qualities of the different people we put in our Metta Bhavana and get a sense of their presence. I sort of have a sort of idea that people have got a sort of taste, a presence that we pick up with our emotional antennae. So get a sense of their presence, their taste, and their unique qualities. And we could, for example, in that practice, praise them. We can make it a practice of praising people in our mind, saying some words of praise. Well done, you're like this. Well done, you're like that. Well done, you've got this quality. For each of the people we think about. And in that way, we can use the Metta Bhavana as an insight practice, a gateway to the discriminating wisdom of Amitabha. So for me, the connection between Amitabha and meditation seems quite clear. And I think we can use an imaginative connection with Amitabha to bring a new life, a new vividness to our meditation. In the mindfulness of breathing, we can think of and allow and connect with the deep peace and beauty and mystery of sunsets. We can allow that to pervade our being. We can open up in that way to the infinite light of Amitabha. We can eat the poison of our negative thoughts and transform them into beauty by becoming aware of them and then rising above them, seeing them as just mental weather, and they change into something quite different. The energy from them is released. In the Metta Bhavana, we can experience the infinite warm red light of Amitabha as the metta that pervades the universe, that we can open up to. So Sangha, I'm not quite sure where, but Sangha at one point advises us. He says, well, maybe in Metta Bhavana, think less about sort of creating metta yourself and more about opening up to experiencing the metta that is everywhere, the metta that just is pervading the universe. So when we're doing the Metta Bhavana, we could experiment with thinking not so much that we are trying to pump out our own metta, but to think that we are opening up to the warm red light of Amitabha, the metta that pervades the universe. We're being receptive and experiencing that metta, which is always there. And as I said, we could think of that metta as the warm, red, infinite light of Amitabha, pervading everywhere, pervading all times, all beings, if only we'll open up to it. And in my experience, that approach to the Metta Bhavana can be especially useful. It can be especially useful to me in the first stage, actually, because to me it can seem quite forced and artificial to me to try to churn out metta for myself. Metta seems to me to be something which is naturally directed outwards to others. So I find, I have found the first stage, I don't think it's particularly that I'm down on myself or anything. How do you do that? I don't know. But if in the first stage, I think more in terms of experiencing the metta, which Amitabha or another higher being, the metta which the enlightened mind feels for me, with all my faults, with all my foibles, and all my conditioning, how would a higher being see me? I believe that a higher being would see me and you and all of us with the discriminating wisdom, with metta. They would do it with understanding of why we are what we are, but there would be this great metta and compassion for the areas where we need compassion. And if I can imagine that, if I can imagine myself, as it were, through the eyes of Amitabha or another enlightened being, that for me is much more powerful than trying to pump out metta for myself, so to redirect it back at myself. And it can open the floodgates to metta as well, to others as well, because, well, if Amitabha or a higher being sees me like that, they see everyone like that. And I can just join in with that metta for all beings as the meditation progresses. So Amitabha, sitting with his hands in the gesture of meditation, I think is very much the meditating Buddha, very connected to meditation, bathing the world in his warm red light. And I believe in the Soto Zen tradition, there's this idea that every meditation seat is connected to the Vajrasana, the diamond seat upon which the Buddha gained enlightenment. It's as though when the Buddha gained enlightenment on his diamond seat, a charge went through time and space which connects that to every other meditation seat. And whenever we sit on our meditation seat, some of that is available to us. Some of the Buddha's enlightenment comes even to us. And we could sort of adapt that myth, if you like, that mythic view, so that when we come to sit in meditation, we could see our meditation cushion or our stool or our chair as a magical portal that connects us to the infinite light of Amitabha, through which the infinite light of Amitabha can be focused, particularly into our mind, so that we can allow his light to shine into our minds and into our hearts. Thank you.